A warm welcome. You're tuned in to Eye on Africa and Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi. These are the top stories on the continent. Africa figures high on the agenda at the G20 Summit in Hamburg as world leaders discuss support and investment for the continent to discourage thousands of people from risking their lives to reach Europe. Amnesty International warns of a climate of fear in Rwanda ahead of presidential elections on August the 4th. The country's electoral commission has meanwhile disqualified 3 candidates from the presidential race. And we bring you an exclusive report on Senegalese fishermen who say they face increasing dangers while working. This after an agreement expired with neighbouring Mauritania. But first, this year's G20 Summit got underway in Hamburg today with Africa a main focal point. Well, Germany are backing a so-called Marshall Plan for Africa, a programme of economic support and investment for the continent. Senegal's President Macky Sall says he approves the initiative, but has stressed that Africa needs to be a partner. Clément Bonnereau reports.
A call for collective action. Germany has put Africa at the top of this year's G20 agenda, alongside financial stability, climate change and security.
Germany has set the focus on Africa because we, Europeans, see Africa as our neighbour. And we have to do everything to help it move forward.
For Germany, which is presiding this year's G20 Summit, investing in Africa is the best way to reduce the number of migrants risking their lives to get to Europe. Germany took in close to 1 million migrants last year, tens of thousands of whom came from African countries. To control future inflows, Berlin is backing a so-called African Compact, that is, a massive programme of economic support to the continent. The aim to encourage private sector investment and create jobs, giving young Africans better prospects in Africa. African leaders welcomed Germany's proposals, but rejected the idea of a Western plan being imposed on Africa.
Africa needs to be considered as a partner. These proposals coming from Angela Merkel are very generous, and we must discuss them with an open mind. But we're also implementing our own programs to boost infrastructure and growth.
Germany is hoping to convince its G20 partners to commit 115 billion euros for investment in African infrastructure. It's estimated that up to 440 million young Africans will be looking for a job in 2030. If they're to find one, Africa needs to create at least 20 million new jobs every year.
In other news, Rwanda's electoral commission has disqualified 3 candidates for next month's presidential elections, including the only woman, saying they didn't fulfil requirements such as collecting enough supporting signatures. Well, Amnesty International has meanwhile warned of a climate of fear in the country ahead of polls. The rights group released a report detailing several alleged violations, including the killing of an opposition party member and harassment against candidates. Well, Muthoni Wanyeki is Amnesty's regional director. Here's what she had to say.
Now, in an electoral period, is any independents and opposition politicians. We've already seen the unexplained disappearance and death of 1 opposition member. 5 candidates were standing for election at the presidential level. So far, only 2, including the incumbent, have been cleared to stand. So that's of concern, because if party leaders can't freely operate, then obviously party supporters would be even more intimidated.
Egyptian officials say at least 23 soldiers were killed and dozens more wounded when 2 deadly car bombs tore through army checkpoints in northern Sinai. The assault began when a suicide car bomber rammed his vehicle into a checkpoint at a military compound near the border town of Rafah. Masked gunmen on foot then opened fire. No group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. A court in DR Congo has sentenced 7 government soldiers to between 15 and 20 years behind bars for murdering suspected militia members in the country's Kasai region. A video of the massacre showing soldiers shooting people, men and women, at point-blank range sparked international criticism of DR Congo's troops. Well, 2 army majors will serve 20 years. 3 others, 15-year sentences were handed down to them. 2 more soldiers who fled were sentenced in absentia to capital punishment. And Ghanaian officials have declared 22 miners dead after an illegal gold mine collapsed in western Ghana. The abandoned mine, which was more than 80 metres deep, collapsed on Sunday. A decision to end a rescue operation for survivors was taken late on Thursday night. Next, in Kenya, a lack of rainfall has left 2.6 million people without any food. Product diversity is diminishing all the time, but the prices of basic goods are rapidly rising. Well, despite the drought, some farmers have found a way to sustain their crops. France 24's Simon Harding has this report.
Mwingi in the east of Kenya. It's in holes like this one that farmers must collect the water for their lands. The lack of rainfall has changed their day-to-day lives. There is no more corn in the fields. The crop needs far too much water. Instead, sorghum now grows abundantly.
In the past, we used to be dependent on corn in the region, but now corn doesn't grow anymore, and we are trying to increase our sorghum production. It grows quickly, sells quickly, and is used quite easily.
Sorghum is an easy commodity to cultivate. It requires 3 times less water than corn, needs less fertilizer, and its deep roots allow it to grow on infertile lands. It's also very nutritious. Crop rotation is one of the methods used to adapt to the increasingly disruptive effects of climate change, a strategy which is backed by agricultural experts.
We start with the farmer right from land preparation and various practices around the same to ensure that the farmer conserves as much moisture as possible at farm level, and employing practices like conservation agriculture.
Conservative agriculture means that land doesn't need to be worked, but the terrain needs to be covered with vegetation in order for it to keep its humidity. However, in order for the process to work, crops must be rotated on a regular basis. Experts hope that these new methods will help farmers fight against droughts in the area and ease the impact of food shortages in the region.
Senegal is a major fishing nation and its fishermen work up and down the West African coastline. Until 2015, the country had an accord with its neighbour Mauritania. The deal, though, wasn't renewed, and authorities say since then there's been increasing tensions between fishermen and the Mauritanian coastguard. France 24's Carl Brown brings us this exclusive report.
Senegalese fisherman Magat Gay inspects the damage done to his pirogue after a high-speed chase with the Mauritanian Coast Guard. He shows where he, his brothers and crew hid when the authorities riddled the boat with bullets. On January 27th, they were setting their nets near the Mauritanian border when the Coast Guard opened fire. Gay shows how he tried to duck for cover. As he rose to change gas tanks, a bullet entered his back and exited through his pelvis.
I thought it was over and that we'd all be dead. Everyone fell silent. I lost a lot of blood.
3 men were injured, including Dudu Ndiaye.
The bullet passed through my left leg and entered my right. Both legs are broken.
A Mauritanian government source says clashes between the Coast Guard and Senegalese fishers are frequent. 2.5 weeks after the incident, the authorities released a statement.
A group of Senegalese artisanal fishers illegally entered Mauritanian territorial waters, resulting in the intervention of the Coast Guard. The fishers responded by throwing Molotov cocktails at the Mauritanian vessels. They then threw their nets in the water, which got tangled with the propellers of the Mauritanian boats. The fishermen pulled the Coast Guard towards the Senegalese border, which obliged the Coast Guard to use force.
The men reject the accusations and say they were fishing in Senegalese waters. Kai Gay, captain of the ill-fated pirogue and brother of Magat, was spared that morning. The third brother, Bara Gay, wasn't so lucky. He was shot in the back of the neck. After weeks in intensive care, he died in March.
The more I think about it, the angrier I feel. I feel like killing someone.
Bauer's brothers and other fishermen want the authorities to do more to protect them, so they can again ply the waters on either side of the border, which have helped fishers make a living for generations.
Exclusive report there by France 24's Carl Brown. And finally, after 2 refusals, the US has granted 5 Gambian students visas to attend an international robotics competition in Washington, D.C., scheduled for the 16th to 18th of July. Well, the group will be able to show off their robot, which is devised to clean contaminated waters in front of peers from 160 countries. Gambia is a Muslim-majority country, but isn't on America's 6-country travel ban, which was implemented by President Donald Trump. Your Eye on Africa team will be back in about 15 minutes' time. Do join us then. Up next, more international headlines. Thomas Waterhouse is here.
Tech 24, presented by Julia Seeger and Dhananjay Kaldilkar.
Self-reliant in energy, no greenhouse gas emissions. Meet the Energy Observer. This futuristic boat will travel the oceans for 6 years, seeking innovative environmental solutions. Before it sets off, Energy Observer will be calling in at Paris, an opportunity to imagine the cities of the future. Follow the start of this odyssey with Tech 24.
Tech 24, en France 24 and France24.com.